Welcome back to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast, brought to you as always by the Hockey Podcast Network. We mentioned earlier in the show that we were going to be joined by a very special guest, one of our best friends in the city of Pittsburgh. We welcome on Brian Metzer, hockey writer and host of the Penguins Radio Network. Brian, how's it going today, buddy?
Oh, I'm wonderful, guys. It's great to be back with you. It's been a little while since we caught up. I think it was just before the Penguins were unceremoniously dispatched from the playoffs last year. So it's good to get back together while we have some fun things to talk about in a new season.
Yeah, it's a ton of fun to be back. Those weren't the greatest of times, but now it's a new year. Things look far better for a lot of different reasons and a lot of different things. And for what it's worth, things are slowly getting back to normal as well.
Yeah, it certainly feels that way, right? Even though we have the specter looming of wondering what the heck is going to happen with February if the league decides not to go to the Olympics. And I know we were just talking in the radio studio last night about how, you're trying to figure out, do you have a couple of weeks off during the season? Are they going to pigeonhole a bunch of games from the end of April into that month? But to your point, yes, it does feel like the world is getting back to normal a lot more than it was when we spoke last. And the Penguins are starting to feel a lot more normal with some guys getting back in, even though they're still not 100% intact.
Yeah.
I mean, they've played very well, especially as of late. If you look at the past 3 weeks, they've had a lot of success, minus a game in Calgary that we should probably not mention too much, or Mike Sullivan might just yell at us through the through.
He seemed mad as could be, right?
Oh yeah, you feel bad for Josh a little bit, but I mean that is part of the gig.
That was his most terse presser of the season, I think. Just with all the one-word answers, because he's been very thorough in the way he's answered questions this year. That night, not so much.
So overall, though, they've played well. But what do you believe this Penguins team is missing right now? I mean, what is their biggest weakness at this moment?
I think for a while there, it was just consistency, because they would have periods where they looked, every bit the Pittsburgh Penguins that we know and love, and their offense was clicking and they were just forechecking like crazy, playing good defensive hockey. Obviously, Tristan Jarry's been giving them great goaltending, but then you would come out and have a little bit of a dud period. I think that's what happened in the Calgary game. They started a little bit slow, at least the last one. And then by the time they kind of kicked it into overdrive, it was a little too late to break through the awesome goaltending they were going up against. And that's something we've talked a whole lot about on our post-game shows, is that's something that has plagued the Penguins over the years, where you have this quote unquote hot goalie syndrome that strikes every so often. And they've done that again this year, where once a guy gets locked in against them, it seems as if they just have so much trouble breaking through. And I don't know if it's that they're overthinking the shooting, or if they're just trying to then create the tic-tac-toe pretty play. But really, I think the main weakness might be just consistent play for 60 minutes every single game in and game out. And if they can do that, they look like a pretty formidable team, even now where they're still missing Evgeni Malkin, Brian Rust, obviously out, coming out of the COVID situation that they had this year. And one other thing I would throw at you guys, it's still not quite where I would like it to be, their power play. They got the 2 5-on-3 goals the other night, which was an apocalyptic moment. I was checking the horizon just to make sure it wasn't a doomsday scenario, since they did get a couple goals in that spot. But that's an area where you always see them thrive on with the extra man. And this year, it's not been there for me near as often as it needs to be. And who knows how many games they could have won earlier this year had they been able to score a power play goal.
Yeah, you mentioned the power play, but one thing that's definitely not lacking right now is the penalty kill, and that's been one of the bright spots of the year. And what or who on that unit has impressed you the most, and is someone submerging as like a leader, emerging as a leader out of those guys?
They've done a nice job as a unit, no matter who's out there. And I know he's not in the lineup right now, but I think somebody that helped them, at least in their approach to the PK, was Brian Boyle. Just coming in and working with some of those guys that are on the unit now. I think they probably learned how important it is to win a face-off shorthanded. There was a situation where, and I was going to next take you to Teddy Bluger. He has been instrumental in the forward ranks, I think, most nights anyway, in terms of being really effective with the PK. If you think back to the 2-man advantage they had to kill against the Toronto Maple Leafs a couple weeks back, it starts off with a huge face-off win from him. I think they allowed one shot throughout the entire 2-man. They're getting pucks out when they get the opportunity to do so. And, just every 4-man unit that jumps the wall for the PK just does such a great job of sticking with their plan. They're not overcommitting to one side or the other, which we've seen in the past from time to time where they would chase the puck a little bit. They're just kind of staying positionally sound with their PK, making solid plays on the wall. When they get a chance to chip it up, they do that. And that was the one thing that I think Boyle maybe helped them with. One of the last games he was in, I saw him make a really subtle play along the wall in terms of just chipping a puck into an area where someone else could clear it. He saw his teammate there, made a play along the wall, got it to a spot where it was cleared the length of the ice, and you're eating up 25 to 30 seconds every time you do that. And it's just worked so well for them. But I think Bluger's been really good in that spot. McGinn, when he gets his chances there, is very good. I think the defensemen have done a great job on the PK this year. And they've gone 11 games in a row now without allowing a power play goal, which is a franchise mark. They're 20. I think they're closing in on 30 power plays killed in a row as well. It was 25 or 26 at my last count. And when you're producing like that on any of your special teams, it's going to impact a hockey game. I just wish that they would score a couple more because it would make that even more magnified. But who would have thought we'd have a Pittsburgh Penguins team that would be historically good on the PK and just not very good on the power play? They're always the other way. That's always the thing that they've worked on late in seasons. If you remember back in 09, even that was the big bugaboo that Shiro had to address to help them go on their cup run was their PK. And that's how we ended up with Hal Gill here in Pittsburgh, because he was a big part of fixing that for them. But right now they are just cruising along at something like 97, almost 98% on the PK. That's unheard of.
Yeah, hats have to be off to Mike Vellucci and the job he's
Yes.
done there with the penalty kill, especially. But to go into the goaltending, which you did mention a little bit earlier, I mean, the stretch that we've seen since basically the blowout in Washington, that was kind of the turning point for Tristan Jarry. And since then, he has been on a heater where he's only given up 2 or fewer goals in every single game, except for the Connor McDavid one, which you can excuse that. It's Connor McDavid. But
Sure.
is this the best we've ever seen Tristan Jarry perform? And is it sustainable for him going forward?
I don't know that he can stay totally at the level that he's at right now. But I mean, even if he dips a little, as he did the other night, I mean, he let up some goals against Edmonton. And even after that, he was still at a .933 save percentage after that game. So that just speaks to how good he has been playing. And I've been very impressed with him, because he could have come in and had the boo-boo lip and kind of been scared into infamy here based on what happened last year in the playoffs. I mean, people were ready to run him out of town. And you mentioned that Washington game. I'm sure you guys appreciated this the way that I did. I love that he came out and said he took that personally, that he let up those goals against them, and that he didn't perform the way he wanted to. And he has just been outstanding ever since. You can really trace it back to, I would say that a few weeks ago when they played the Buffalo Sabres right ahead of that winning streak, they came out, excuse me, and had the third period where they really pushed. They couldn't get that game tied up, and they ended up losing. But from then on, the team as a whole, but Tristan Jarry especially, has looked like a different guy. They just wanted to win hockey games. He's been rolling along, making every first save. He looks big in the net. I like the way he's challenging. That's something that he's doing a little bit differently than he has in the past. He's not staying deep in the net too much. You've seen him come out to the top of that crease area. He's active with his stick. He's doing all these little things. And we were noticing even out of his equipment the other night, not as if he looks like he's some Hercules now or something like that, but he looks, this is going to sound stupid, but he looks like an athlete now. He just looked more filled out. He has a jawline, all these kinds of things. And I don't know if he was just working hard on conditioning in the off season. I know he worked hard with Andy Chiodo in terms of his approach to playing goal. And maybe all of that just has worked very well to get him to where he is, but he's been outstanding for them. I'm really looking forward to seeing him try to maintain this. He's on pace to play something like 65 games this year, which the Penguins have only had a goalie play that many games where they were over 60 in a season 8 times since the 2000-2001 season. All of those were Marc-Andre Fleury, except for once where Hedberg did it. So other than that,
Yes.
they've not really had a guy that could play all of these games for a team and backstop them the way that Jarry is right now. And I was kind of, I guess, encouraged by the way Casey DeSmith played just last night, because they were in a spot where you almost had to play Jarry every single night because you were losing every game that his backup played. And it had a lot of us wondering if they would consider Louis Domingue at some point just to give someone else an opportunity. But if you can get Casey back to being a solid backup to give Jari an occasional night off, I think he can do a pretty good job of staying somewhat at the level he is at right now, which is outstanding. But it's hard to stay at under 2 goals, 2 or less goals per night as an NHL goalie with the way these shooters are. But I love what I'm seeing from him right now. And he looks like a totally different guy than he was just last year in that playoff series where you thought he may have been Jim carried out of the league, ruined, had his psyche destroyed. That's not him now. He looks very strong and mentally tough.
Yeah, and you mentioned DeSmith being finally getting a solid start. We were hot on the Louis Domingue train for a little bit now. But, I mean, other than Jari being very consistent and DeSmith finally pulling it up, who in your eyes has been a breakout player for the Penguins so far, or like an unsung hero of sort?
You know what? When you look at this team, it's a lot of fun to see guys like Danton Heinen emerge. He was a very under the radar uh, acquisition in terms of free agency. People were like, "Well, yeah, his rookie year was outstanding with Boston, but he's dipped in every season since. I mean, his numbers have dropped off, his shooting percentage has dropped off." And we were saying this year that if he got back to shooting the puck a lot more, he said it as much in training camp that he would be rewarded for that. And I think you can make a case that he has. I know he has these little streaks where he's very good offensively for a handful of games and then he dips, but he started the season like gangbusters, and it made it a lot easier to lose a guy like Tanev who started out of the gate so hot with his goal scoring for Seattle. I think that you see the way that Heinen and McGinn have fit in, it helped us forget him. But I think Heinen's a breakout player for them, at least in terms of getting himself back to where he was a couple of years ago in his career. And we'd be remiss if we didn't mention Evan Rodrigues. I mean, this guy to come in and essentially at one point lead this team in scoring, which was funny to see just because nobody would have anticipated that Evan would be the guy that would kind of most help offset the losses of Sidney Crosby and Evgeni Malkin. And he's a Swiss Army knife. He plays anywhere in their lineup. He can be on the wing. He can be at the center position. He can check. He can score. And his offensive game has really opened up this season. I know it's never going to be, at least in my view, something that's going to be a 30 goal per year type guy. But that said, he is very productive with Sid and Jake right now. And what's interesting to me is you look back at the line that they had back in the day with Sid, and I'm not making the comparison apples to apples, but Sid with Kunitz and Pascal Dupuis. There's probably a little bit of Dupuis in Evan Rodrigues. He may not be quite as productive as Duper was at times with that group, but he's looked really good. He doesn't look intimidated playing with them. And the biggest thing is he doesn't defer to them. You know, that when you play a guy that's not at maybe the quite same level as a Sidney Crosby or a Jake Gensel, something like that, they tend to do that a little too much. You think back to guys like Kip Miller or something here back in the day where they would just constantly feed the puck to Jaromir Jagr, or Johan Herdina did that a whole lot over his years. They wouldn't take a shot. They would just pass. Evan Rodrigues doesn't do that. He goes out, he creates his own plays, he creates his own space. He's a great skater, and we love that shot that he's been able to show off from the point, and even off the rush. He's not afraid to let it fly, and it's an accurate, hard slap shot or wrist shot when he lets it loose. So I would say those two guys for me jump off the page as guys that are doing more than we probably anticipated coming into the season.
We had seen glimpses of that shot from Evan Rodrigues in seasons past, but it seems like he's starting to actually come into his own with it and be a little bit more confident with it too, letting it loose a little bit more often than he did before.
Yeah, you're right about that. And I know this was something that Paul Steigerwald has mentioned quite a bit when we were talking over the last few weeks. Based on his chances on the power play and the way he wasn't getting a whole lot of them, but when he would get the chance out there and the way he would shoot from the point, it had him ask the question of Evan one day about playing the point on the power play back when he was in college. And he said he did it all the time. He would love to get the opportunity to do that a little bit more. And he's very comfortable in that role. So I know he's still not really out there in that spot as often as maybe we would like, but that's something I think we'll see as we move through the season, at least until you get Evgeni Malkin back, because that was the one thing when we're talking about the Penguins power play that I think is lacking a little bit, is they don't really have that one-timer, and you just don't even see them setting up for it. That's something that I think Gino brings to the table whenever he is available, even if it doesn't work. they at least try and get him posted up at the top of the face-off circle, and they feed him those passes, and he takes that shot. That's something Rodrigues could probably do for them if need be, and maybe you'll see it a little bit more before Gino gets back in. But Evan Rodrigues is a very confident hockey player right now, and by all rights, they love him. I mean, his teammates think they really enjoy his presence. He's a much more decent guy than I think I thought he was when he arrived, because I never like when somebody comes off of a situation where they've demanded a trade and it just doesn't work out with a team. And you would have thought a player like that with a pretty bad Buffalo team, he would have found a way to thrive because he could have played top 6 minutes a lot. And he kept finding his way out of the lineup when he was a member of the Sabres. Right now, he looks like a great citizen for this team, is a great player, plays in any situation they need him to. And who would have thought Evan Rodrigues would be a part-time leading scorer here until the last few weeks, and a top line right winger. I mean, that's unbelievable to me. Good for him.
And then a first line center whenever all hell broke loose. Like, Evan Rodrigues has been pretty incredible.
That was the best night when you saw that lineup come out, and it's like, oh, your new top line center, Evan Rodrigues.
Just like we all had on our bingo cards for this season, right, everybody?
Yep.
I'm glad.
It's just unbelievable. And those are the cool stories, I think, that emerge when you have guys injured and you have other players willing to step up and do some good things for you.
I'm glad you actually mentioned Evgeni Malkin a minute ago, because he is seemingly getting closer. It's nice to see him with the team, eating sushi, enjoying the locker room, and everybody else is out there working hard.
Was it not?
Yeah, I'm wondering if that was his order, or if that was for the entire team.
The DoorDash guy was upset he had to bring all that in.
Yeah, he had to do the plating too, make sure it was set up nice.
It was beautiful.
It was nice. But since he's getting closer to return, what do you think the lineup looks like when he finally makes his return? I mean, who's playing on the wings with Evgeni Malkin?
Wow. You know, the main thing that this is a good problem to have, because when everyone's healthy, they have so many bodies available at this point, and there's going to be some tough decisions that are going to have to be made. One thing for sure, and we just discussed this last night, we think that the first thing that might be considered is putting Kapanen with him, just because they played so well together for periods of time last year. And you got to find some way to unlock that kid, because he's been probably the most anemic player on the roster at this point. And when we were talking about surprise players, he's probably a surprise in the wrong way, because we all thought he would be a star this year with that speed and the way he played last season. So I think that you'll probably see Gino get a chance with Kasperi Kapanen. I don't know that it would be Jason Zucker on the other side at this point, just because I like the way he has looked with Jeff Carter, and Carter with Heinen all of a sudden looked very good last night. So that trio might stay intact. And what's intriguing about this is, if you keep your top line as it is, you have a Gino line with Kasperi Kapanen and somebody on the other side. You then have the Carter line that I just mentioned. Then you can still kind of have a very similar Bluger line that has been effective in the past, where you could have Bluger, Czar, and Brock McGinn. And that leaves some big names out of the mix that then would be in running to be on the other wing of Evgeni Malkin. I think that is the one spot that is going to be the biggest competition right now. Guys have got to open the coaching staff's eyes to say, hey, we want the right to try and be on Gino's other wing, at least while you experiment with Kasperi Kapanen working with him. But even as I say that about Kapanen, we've watched him fall from a second line role to a third line role to a fourth line role. And do you really want to immediately throw him with Gino? They might try it at first, but I think at this point, and this is just my opinion, he's probably closer to a healthy scratch for a night or two than he is to playing in your top 6 again right now today, based on what we're seeing. But I do think that would be a good mix to try and get him going. And then we just have to figure out who's on the left wing with those two players before this is going to be all said and done. I know a couple of my media brethren here in Pittsburgh have thrown out the whole thing, which upsets every apple cart you can think of. They are dying to have Jeff Carter move up to Sid's right wing, have Evan Rodrigues be a center, and then start mixing and matching that way. I'm not on board with that. I like Jeff Carter where he's playing right now.
That's just a lot of movement.
Why should you screw everything up just for one guy coming back?
We have a lot of utilities that are able to switch between wings and centers, but that's just a lot of maneuvering for one simple move. But yeah, we couldn't let you get out of here without a music question. So since, like I mentioned before, things have opened up a little more. Have you gone back to any concerts yet? And do you have any on your calendar coming up? Because I'm back at Stage AE again. I got moved up to the box office, and it's nice to be back around shows again all the time.
I'm gonna have to stop down there and see you. I haven't been to AE for a show since things opened back up, but I did. My first thing back was I went to see 80s hair rockers, Faster Pussycat. They were at Jurgles out in Warrendale here, and it was awesome because they played with. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the band Enough's Enough. They were another kind of 80s 90s hair band, so they were the opener for Faster Pussycat, who I've always had a soft spot for them, and I had never seen them, so I wanted to make sure to see them, and it was a very sparsely populated show. First of all, based on the acts, but secondly, it still wasn't. I think there's still people tentative about going to things, so that was fun for a first one back. We saw the Black Crowes this summer when they played at the amphitheater, which was excellent. They played their entire first album, the Shake Your Moneymaker album, and that was really good with some other hits. We saw Kiss out there, and actually that was a crazy story, and not to bore you with the details, but they had a first date that was in August, I believe.
Yeah.
And then Paul Stanley got COVID. We were in traffic waiting to get off the exit in Burgettstown, and nobody announced anything. The traffic was backed up at least 1.5 miles on the highway, and we're trying to figure out what the heck is going on. Some crazy guy gets out of a car a few ahead of us, walks out in the weeds and relieves himself, and then walks back, and he's knocking on everybody's car window saying, "The show's effing canceled, man. Someone's sick." And we're like, what? What's going on here? But yeah, so then they rescheduled for October, and we were there. And I'm trying to think what I have upcoming. I have Ghost and Volbeat, which I'm afraid is going to get screwed up by the Olympics, which I've told them, it's like, you know what? If you suddenly put a game on that night, I'm not giving up my tickets to that show because I bought them, thinking we would have that. And then we have a bunch of stuff coming up in the summer, hopefully, that's rescheduled from last year, including the Motley Crue, Def Leppard, PNC Park show.
Yeah, I know. Me and Brlansky have a buddy who does stagehand work for a lot of shows out at the Pavilion. He said he was working when the Kiss news happened on the original show. So he knew all the details about that before you probably did in the traffic. And anyone who's been to the amphitheater knows that traffic
Nightmare
on the highway.
Well, and you know what? We haven't seen that happen in years where you get to the exit and the cars were completely backed up at a standstill. I mean, there's traffic all the time there, but they're moving at least. Well, apparently what happened, and you may have heard this just from, your behind the scenes information. Yeah. They closed the lots to try and get everybody out. So all the traffic that was incoming still was kind of just at a standstill. So just to put it in perspective, we left our house in Ohio Township at probably 4:30. We stopped in Robinson and grabbed a bite to eat, got on the highway to the amphitheater, sat in traffic for what seemed like at least an hour and a half, got off the exit finally, and got right back on the highway and drove home. So after leaving here at 4:30, we got back to our house at about 8:15 or 8:30. So a 4-hour odyssey with no show, but we did have Blaze Pizza. So it was intriguing. So that was crazy that it happened that way, but we were glad that they were able to get us rescheduled so quick, because as Kiss typically does, if you look at their schedule, they literally had almost every other day concerts scheduled through May of next year for their farewell tour. I'm like, there's no way they're getting back here at any time in the near future. And lo and behold, they got here in October. So that was well worth it. But that was probably one of my, and I probably said this to you guys before when we talked, that was one of the main things I missed during the whole pandemic was live music. Yeah. So getting back to it was really fun. And it was awesome to be a part of concerts again. And I would have been at AE if there was Exodus, Testament, and Death Angel had scheduled a show for November, and then they pushed it back, and I just ended up getting a refund because I'm like, I'm sure it's not going to sell out. I can get tickets again if I want to, but that would have been my first foray back into stage AE. And we do have a Roxy show coming up. I left off, which I'm really excited about. And you guys follow me, so you know that I'm into some crazy stuff. Me and Vinny, who does the music at the arena, are pumped because Mayhem, Norwegian black metal gods Mayhem, are coming back to Pittsburgh with Watain, and they will be at the Roxy in May, I believe. So we're pretty fired up about that one.
That's good.
Assuming they can get into the country and have no issues, because they're coming from Norway and Sweden, because Watain is from Sweden.
Well, Metz. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
You're good. I'm saying that's just wild music. I was just thinking out loud.
Give them a try. You'll love it.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Mets. Let everybody know where they can find you on social media and anything else you want to pump out here. Just you have the floor.
Thank you. As usual, you can find me on Twitter at Brian_Metzer. There is a Brian Metzer, all one word. I may have shared this with you before as well. He's some sort of evangelist or something in Ohio, polar opposite of me. I'm not an evangelist, but I may have money hidden in my wall like Joel Osteen. You never know. But I don't. I wish I did. But yeah, so at Brian_Metzer. My Instagram, I believe, is the same handle. And if you just want a more behind the scenes view of craziness, such as the Mayhem concert or my cat or anything else, you can find that there. Available for all intermission reports, post-game shows on the Penguins Radio Network. Paul Steigerwald and I are part of that post-game show, and we do every Saturday morning on 105.9 The X, obviously, with our Penguins Live Weekly. Still have FromThePoint.com, which is still not quite as active as I would like it to be because I've been running wild with all my radio stuff, but that is my official writing outlet that I'm trying to get back into doing again. And for now, that's probably the bulk of it. I have a couple other irons in the fire in terms of some writing stuff, which I can share with you guys down the line if that comes to pass.
Awesome. Well, Mets, as always, you're always welcome back. You're one of our favorite guests to have on. Thank you so much for giving us your time today.
Of course, guys. Appreciate you having me on. I always enjoy catching up with you. And I know we don't get to talk as often as we would probably like, but it's fun when we get to do it on these platforms. So thanks for having me.